13th of March 2023. This Skidmarks is one of that what the fuck moments, and it is titled Iran and Saudi for Dummies. A lot of things happened over the past 3 days in the Middle East, and I thought that it would be a good thing to just give a little bit of an overview of the history of Iran and Saudi and why it is so important to take note of the fact that they have decided to re-establish diplomatic relationships. Most of us could remember the fall of the Shah and then the subsequent takeover by the Ayatollahs. For us as Westerners, it was a major issue, and we saw Iran retreat from a modern state back to the Dark Ages. Well, that is what we were told. The Americans lost their grip on Iran, and we all know about the catastrophic failures that the US encountered in Iran. This was the start of a major anti-Iran drive by the USA, and the media blacked out anything from Iran unless it was beneficial to the US narrative that Iran is the devil. The US used Saddam Hussein of Iraq to fight Iran non-stop, until Saddam said, "I want euros for my oil and not dollars." And then that was his death sentence. We all remember the WMD farce that led to the destruction of Iraq and the killing of Saddam. Now, just take note, I'm not for one moment want to give the impression that I'm 100% historically correct and my sequences is correct and all of that. I'm just a guy that read a lot, listen a lot, and think a lot. And I tend to look at the details, deep into the details, and then try to see if I can see relations and relationships and connections between incidents. That is important for me. And what I'm sharing with you here is really a layman's overview of the background of what's happening in the Middle East. The end of the Iraq war left Iraq in turmoil with internal conflicts all the time, and in this chaos the Americans are pumping the oil non-stop. Exactly what they did after the crash of the USSR. Plunder the resources. Look at this map. See all the US bases in the Middle East. What the hell are they there for? None of those countries are a threat to the USA. Through these bases they spread chaos throughout the region, arming terrorist groups to destabilize every government. That is their modus operandi. That is how they work. They don't care about the morality. They're arming ISIS, they're arming Al-Qaeda, they're arming every terror group in the Middle East, just to cause instability and to make the governments struggle. And then, in that chaos, they plunder those countries. Through these bases, they spread chaos throughout the region, arming terrorist groups to destabilize every government. That is their modus operandi. They destroyed Iran, Iraq, and Syria by engineering the collapse of the chosen or elected governments. And on top of all, they bombed the holy shit out of everything, killing millions of people, destroying millions of lives. In 1971, Nixon made a deal with the Saudi king that they will protect the house of Saud against the revolution, incidentally revolutions that they normally start. In exchange, Saudi must sell their oil for dollars and park their profits in US Treasury bonds. This was the birth of the petrodollar and the subsequent cementing of the dollar as a global reserve currency. The US went off the gold standard and started flooding the globe with dollars, paper dollars. 70% of all dollars are outside America, and this allowed the US to export their inflation to the rest of the world. Through SWIFT, Visa, MasterCard, they basically controlled all the financial transactions in the world. This control allowed other madness to take root: sanctions. American sanctions destroyed many countries because those countries were cut off from the global financial system, and other countries were scared to help sanctioned countries because then they might get sanctioned themselves. So sanctions turned into a WMD in the hands of the West. In my own country, we had first-hand experience of Western sanctions. Then came Biden, and one of his gifts to the world was the Ukraine war. Let's call it Operation Boomerang. The sanction attack was brutal and clearly aimed at destroying Russia economically. Problem for the West was nobody paid attention to Putin's speech in Munich in 2007. Then the Crimea adventure of 2014 and the subsequent sanctions confirmed to Putin that the West cannot be trusted. He structured the Russian economy to become as sanction-proof as possible, and the 2022 onslaught proved that he was right. When the Western markets lost to Russia, Putin had to find alternatives. Fortunately, Russia is rich in what the world needs: oil, gas, grain, metals, coal, fertilizer, etc. Plus, a major bonus and a plus point for Russia is self-sufficient in food and energy, two basic commodities without which no country can survive. Very quickly, the Russians implement alternatives for SWIFT, and most important, abandoned the dollar and the euro in trades, demanding rubles for its gas, and took national currencies and Bitcoin as payment for other transactions and commodities. And that is important. Plus, another thing that the Americans never thought about, by cutting Russia off SWIFT, all of a sudden they lost the ability to know what the Russian economy is doing. Russian and Chinese relations was always good, and China sucked up most of the gas that used to go to Europe. China and India also sucked up vast quantities of Russian oil. Russian and Iranian relations jumped to the foreground, and Putin's visit to Iran raised eyebrows in the West. And they raised their eyebrows, but there was nothing they could do about it, because next to Russia, Iran is also brutally under sanctions from the West. Next, the Iranian leader visited China, and if the West were alert, they would have noticed it for what it was. But as usual, the West is absorbed by their own arrogance. Then the disastrous visit of Biden to MBS of Saudi. And who can forget that fist bump? If the Americans were not so arrogant and self-assured, they would have seen the signs. Then Putin visited MBS, and the atmosphere was clearly different. They were laughing and joking, and you could see there was mutual respect in the relationship. Then the historical visit of Xi from China to Saudi. That was his first international visit since the COVID thing. And the images we saw transmitted an image of respect and friendliness. The West should have paid a lot more attention to this, but they were too engulfed in the Ukraine fiasco and the poking of China through Taiwan. And then a few days ago, the bombshell. Saudi and Iran undertook to restore diplomatic ties through the mediation of the Chinese. To understand the ramifications of this agreement, we need to look at the map. The green is Saudi Arabia and the yellow is Iran. They are clearly the dominant powers in the Middle East. The three arrows are the vital exits for Saudi oil to their clients. The top left is the Suez Canal controlled by Egypt. Top right is the Strait of Hormuz that Iran can easily cut off. Bottom left is the exit from the Red Sea that could be cut off by Yemen. The green arrow bottom left is where the Chinese have a naval base in Djibouti. Now there are some rumors. Iran guaranteed the access through the Strait of Hormuz. China guaranteed access through the Bab al-Mandab Strait. Iran agreed to drop their pursuit of nuclear weapons. Iran requested the war in Yemen to be stopped. Russia agreed to sell the MiG-35s to Iran. Iran wants the US troops out of Syria. Now these are rumors, but there is things happening, and has already happened, that makes this more than rumors. There are clear signs to confirm these were not all rumors. China has already conveyed the message that the US must get out of Syria, backed by Russia. Now look at this map of the American bases in the Middle East. Clearly they now have a problem. With Iraq and Turkey supporting the call for the Americans to get out of Syria, those US troops there will find themselves isolated with no clear logistical lines. With Saudi showing a willingness to stop the war in Yemen, the British, American and French troops will have to get out of there. With the two major powers in the Middle East at peace, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar and Oman will follow where they lead, and that will mean more USA bases at risk. It is clear that the days of the US hegemony is fast running out, because if those Middle Eastern countries should turn aggressive, those American bases will be wiped out within a short time, and they will use a variety of missiles, of which many will be supersonic and hypersonic, before the US can even think of reinforcing them. To me, it looks like the Middle East is entering a new era, with peace and stability on the table. This will allow them to rebuild their shattered countries and get the militants under control. Militants that are incidentally all financed and armed by the US. In the end, nationalism is going to trump being enslaved by the US. With China and Russia in the corner of the Middle East, the West is doomed to fail. Iran and Saudi has already applied for membership of BRICS, and that is a huge blow for the West. The world is changing, and the West need to adapt to the new world. They need to learn to be good neighbors instead of warmongers that threaten and plunder. Can the West adapt? In my mind, they don't have an option. If they don't adapt, they will perish. 80% of the global population had enough of it. And just as a side note, I used to spend a lot of time in Kuwait and Abu Dhabi in the middle 2000, from 2004 to 2009. And during that time, to me, it was quite interesting to note that my host didn't talk about Iran. They referred to it as Persia, and they see the Iranians as Persians, not Arabs. And yeah, I just saw that, and I asked the one guy about it, and he explained to me that that is actually Persia, and it's been like that for hundreds and thousands of years. That is what it is, the Persian Empire. So, where is it going to end? I don't know. Where it's heading is a further destruction of the US brutal grip over the globe. And the Americans need to really think carefully about this, and they must understand that times are changing. Just think about it for a moment. The Middle Eastern civilizations are literally thousands of years old, and the American empire is about 240 years old. They're still in an embryo phase. They're not even into diapers yet. And look what they have managed to do to themselves in the past 50 years. In the middle 50s, since World War II until about the 60s, everybody admired the US. And then they started with this thing of warring all over the globe. And by the late 90s, it was a reality that the largest part of the world population absolutely hate Americans. And we can see it now. If you look in Africa, they don't get any warm welcomes here. Same in South America. And more countries openly and visibly choose sides with Russia against America. So, interesting times. Let's see where this ends. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.